Mr. Epsom 2.0.
It is the year 3000. Almost 1,000 years have passed since the rise in popularity of an ancient technology called float tanks. A technology that historians would later refer to as the harbingers of doom. It all started fine. More float centers were opening. People were feeling happy and relaxed. But as the phenomenon grew, the whole Earth began to be slowly covered with layers of Epsom salt. Buildings crumbled. The entire fabric of society fell apart. It's only recently that a group of rogue scientists stumbled across a shred of hope. Encased in salt, in the remnants of an old float center in a city that used to be known as Portland, Oregon, now a region referred to as Skull Death Island, they dug up a piece of equipment that could prove to be the answer to humanity's problems. A salt cleaning robot.
Mr. Epsom.
Okay.
Hey, welcome everyone.
Yeah, hey everybody. So, I'm Graham.
And I'm Ashkahn.
And I'm pulling up our question right now.
I'm prepared, huh?
Yeah, no, I'm very prepared.
What's going on over there?
There was some technical issues. So the question for today is, what is HDPE and where the hell do you buy it?
Okay. Well, HDPE is High Density Polyethylene.
Yep, and
You buy it at a High Density Polyethylene store. So
that High Density Polyethylene Emporium.
yeah.
I mean, basically, it's kind of like a plasticky plywood.
Yeah, just
almost is
plastic,
what
yeah.
that's.
Oh,
but
plasticky plywood.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying. I'm with you now.
Yeah, and we use HDPE in a lot of areas where we would use wood. But
Yeah.
because wood will get destroyed by all the moisture and salt and things like that, we want something that, of course, is just totally non-porous, and HDPE kind of fits the mold.
Yeah, I've seen some, like, a few float centers have a few wood things, and they buy, like, special wood, and they put, like, serious sealant on it and stuff like that. So I think there is a certain thing you can do to make wood work, but, you know, it's easier just to buy plastic. I mean, it doesn't quite look as nice. It looks like plastic.
I mean, I think it looks nice.
It doesn't look like a, you know, cheap little toy or something like that. It's got some different, like, finish to it that looks a little bit more matte, or it has a little bit of texturing and things like that.
Yep. So, for example, we kind of end up building these custom pump boxes around some of our pump filtration situations that we have going on. And we'll end up building those out of HDPE, for example. We'll use HDPE as the platform to set our float tanks on with vibration isolation pads underneath. So
this is like boats use this material to build their cabinets or kind of parts of their outdoor things, like doors to different parts that are actually exposed to water. And basically, the reason people like it is because, you know, it's a plastic material, so it's not going to get damaged like wood or corroded like metal. But you can cut it, usually just with like a normal circular saw, like you'd be cutting wood. And you can screw into it like you would wood.
yeah, you can take it out to movies with you.
Just like you would with a piece of 2x4.
Build yourself a little stand-up Ashkahn and Graham that you can keep with you at all times. So very
basically,
flexible.
Yeah, you can manipulate it and you can work with it in the same way that you can with wood. But it's made of plastic and it's strong and you know, for a float center, it's water and salt resistant.
So,
And
what were you going to say?
I was going to say there's certain versions. There's like brand names of HDPE out there that are a little bit more expensive, and often it's because they have some sort of UV resistant material mixed into the HDPE, because again, this is used a lot for boats and things like that.
Seaboard? Is that what
Seaboard
it's
is one of the brands. I don't know if there's other brands. That's definitely the one we know of.
Yeah, and they'll just end up being more expensive. So the more generic HDPE, just because it's going to be used in float tank rooms, which
Yeah.
are getting no exposure to sunlight at all, like
Yeah.
barely even exposure to fluorescent lights or anything. So
So yeah, you're kind of just looking for generic HDPE boards, and they can come in all sorts of thicknesses, and you can usually ask the company where you're getting it from to cut it down to certain sizes for you, because these things can be big and they can be pretty heavy.
and that gets to the second
It's a
part of the
nice,
question, which is what
segue.
are these stores, right? Which is, I mean, it's like big kind of contractor, like plastic store, like heavy duty
Yeah.
industrial supply, but for plastics is often where you'll pick this up.
Yeah, like the places we found them are, you know, on the outskirts of town in the kind of area where you find all sorts of weird industrial stuff. And it's just a company that deals in all sorts of different plastics is usually where we
we're
find it.
kind of joking at the beginning, but it is actually kind of a plastic emporium. is where you go to grab these things.
And I think I literally found ours just by Googling like HDPE. Or, another one is you can look at Seaboard, and that'll actually help you find specifically places that sell it, and then you can ask those people if they have generic HDPE as well. That's
clever.
actually how I remember finding the place we bought it for. The guy was like, you don't really need like the Seaboard stuff. Why don't you just get this other stuff we have? It's the same thing without this UV stuff. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, sounds great.
Nice. And for the record, do you remember what the thickness is that we use for the HDPE board when we're usually getting it, like for under the tank?
For under the tank?
Yeah.
I think we go with 1 inch.
I think so too, but now I'm thinking 0.75.
Yeah, it was either 0.75 or an inch, but I'm leaning towards an inch. But I don't know, somewhere in that range is probably okay.
We'll call this off the record. It's somewhere between 3/4 and an inch is what we use under the tanks.
But it's serious. I mean, it's heavy. Like,
it's really heavy.
We went to the nice thing is these come in. You can get them. I mean, you can get plywood in bigger pieces than 4x8 as well. But same with HDPE, you can find it in larger pieces, so you can actually use like a single piece underneath a float tank. But sometimes we cut them in two just for the ease of getting them into the room and not having it be like a huge, gigantic single piece thing.
Also, why it's totally worth having the supplier actually cut it at their big warehouse is because it's really hard stuff to move around in a big solid piece.
The inch thick stuff is like, I mean, it's real heavy to lift a like 9x5 piece of 1 inch HDPE board. But once you get it there, it's great. I mean, we've had it for some years now, and like it's held up great. Like I haven't noticed any damage or anything like that.
Not a problem with it at all. And little pro HDPE tip here too on the kind of sharp corners or just edges of the HDPE. You can actually even sand that down like wood too. So really get rid of any kind of sharpness that you have when you're putting it into your float rooms. Kind of like cut it at a curved angle and sand down the sharp little edges.
Yeah, you can do anything. Like I make my clothes out of it. It's just protective. When I go clean the float tanks, I'm totally covered.
It's good. It's hard to get through the door, but. All right.
Cool.
Anything else that you wanted to pass on about HDPE?
I think that's pretty. I've never really looked into other. Like I don't know if there's like a low density polyethylene that would be like lighter, easy to work with. So I don't know. Maybe someone can do more research into
high density monoethylene. Or...
But this does seem to be like a very generic, kind of easy to come across thing. I guess it's more expensive than wood too. You should. know that.
Yeah.
Like a big sheet, like a 4x8 sheet of inch thick was like $200 something if my memory is serving me correctly, something like that, maybe more.
It is more expensive, definitely. I mean, we did used to have plywood in our rooms and for the base of the tanks and stuff, and eventually we just had to replace it. So the downside of going with something that isn't impermeable is its life is ultimately limited, right?
For under the tank, I would not use plywood.
No,
it really it's hard to get under there. I mean, we have ours set up to the point where I guess here's another little tip for you guys here. We have
just between you and us,
Check this out. Here's a little thing we got going on. We take our float tanks, we put them on an HDPE board. And the reason we're even putting them on HDPE board in the first place is because we have all of our float tanks sitting on top of vibration isolation pads. And we don't want to connect the vibration isolation pads directly to the float tank, unless your manufacturer says it's okay. But we don't want to connect them directly to the float tank because they're just these little things. They're like 3-inch by 3-inch pucks. And so we're worried that the strength of the fiberglass just sitting on those few small points will not be strong enough to kind of have all of its weight distributed just over small.
Convinced. I'm so certain that would cause problems.
So instead what we do is we connect the 3-inch pucks, 3-inch by 3-inch pucks to a piece of HDPE, and then we sit the whole float tank down on top of the HDPE board. So then it goes basically float tank sitting on top of HDPE, sitting on top of usually 11 of these 3-inch by 3-inch vibration isolation pads, kind of spread out in a pattern.
I just realized the acronym for that is VIPs, by the way. Go on.
All right. The HDPE sitting on these VIPs. And the benefit of that, if you use HDPE and if you specifically use kind of water-resistant, anti-mildew, mold mildew vibration isolation pads, which usually most people use ones made by Diversitech. They use like EVA kind of material. The benefit at that point is that everything's waterproof, and what you can actually do is spray underneath your float tank.
Awesome.
So instead of being worried about wood or, as salt just starts to get under there in these hard to reach places, or for whatever reason, you have a leak coming out of your filtration system and salt's now underneath your float tank. When you have a system fully set up like this, you can literally just take a sprayer or a hose or whatever and just spray underneath the float tank. And if your slopes are set up
I was going to say, if your room is actually sloped properly and you have a drain possibly even under there back by your filtration that it's running to.
Now you're talking. All that water just comes right back down, goes down a drain. That's it. You're living the good life. You can go sit back on your HDPE lounge chair and pull a martini out of your HDPE martini cup and,
pour some liquid HDPE in there and just go to town.
Hang out, relax. It's over. You're done. The float tank takes care of itself at that point. So anyway, I think that answers this question.
Yeah, if you have any more questions about fancy acronyms, send them in to fts.com. No, don't go there. Right. It's Float Tank Solutions, floattanksolutions.com/podcast.
And we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.